Yep, but our next guest says the greatest threat to France, not terrorism, but rather the lack of free speech, and the U.S. could be heading down the same path. Joining us right now, George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley. What has France been doing to restrict free speech that still got them into trouble?
Well, the great irony is that the editors and the writers of this magazine were primarily concerned with prosecution. They were in continual struggle with the government and people that wanted them prosecuted for the exercise of free speech. One of the editors, one of the surviving editors, recently lashed out at people who were protesting, saying, "Where have you been for years when we were fighting these domestic laws and fighting these efforts to shut us down?"
Sure. Give us some examples of how they have criminalized free speech in France.
Well, actually, across Europe, not just France, but France is one of the leading countries on this trend, has been criminalizing all types of speech that criticize folks for their religion or their sexuality or sexual orientation or gender. There's this trend towards prosecution of people who engage in hate speech or speech that's viewed as discriminatory. And these laws are often very generally written as to whether you insult or annoy someone's religion. And it creates a slippery slope. And the response is that people like those killed at this magazine aren't quite sure when they will be prosecuted and when they will be allowed to speak.
Right.
Yeah, some of the toughest laws in the EU on this topic. I saw a sign in the crowd yesterday that was the Voltaire quote, something like, "I don't agree with what you say, but I'll defend it to the death," or something like that, which is, really resonated, I think, with everybody there. What parallels do you see going on here in the United States? Do you see us following suit at all?
Well, we're doing much better than, for example, our neighbors, including Canada. Canada is way down this path. They've crossed the Rubicon in that sense. The First Amendment and its jurisprudence do protect us, but we're seeing a lot of these claims being made in the United States. There was a circus clown that pretended he was Obama years ago, and people demanded that he be investigated. The Obama administration changed U.S. policy in the first term and worked with Muslim countries to try to come up with an international blasphemy standard. That was shocking to many of us in the free speech community.
Sure. And us too. But let me add this to it. It's also kind of disturbing too when you look back at what happened leading up to Benghazi after our 20 embassies were attacked on that day. Next thing you know, there's a producer in jail on some ancillary charges, and he's getting condemned for putting together this horrible movie.
Well, actually, that's an excellent example of how we're talking a good game. After the Danish cartoon controversy, all the West came out and said we support free speech, as they did this weekend. But you'll notice almost immediately these countries started to prosecute people for divisive speech. And the same thing happened there. What was the next image we saw? It was this producer being arrested on a collateral charge. That was not an accident.
And what they have done in Europe, and in particular in France, which we're talking about today, they've given up some liberty, and they've given it up a lot because it's hard to get back. The final line of your column yesterday in the paper was, "The terrible truth, it only takes a single gunman to kill a journalist, but it takes a nation to kill a right." And that's what's happened.
Well, unfortunately, I think that's true. We have such close connections to France. We are bound by history. But France has taken a different path, and I think it's a dangerous path for liberty. And this is really the cradle of liberty.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your observations. Jonathan Turley, law professor at George Washington.